Another year is almost done. I do not believe 2019 is almost over. Where did the time go? Anyways, I thought I would do a video of my favorite books of 2019. I believe I read 56 books this year. My goal is always 52. I try to read one a week. But I exceeded the goal this year by a few, which I'm very glad about. So let's dig right in and do my top 10 fiction books. And then I have 3 nonfiction books as well that were my favorites this year. So my first one, I have my notes over here, so I'm going to be referring to them so I don't forget anything. My first one is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. This book has been on my shelf for years. As a matter of fact, the pages have started to yellow. That's how long it's been on my bookshelf. Anyways, this is the story of Francie, a coming-of-age book of a girl named Francie in the early 1900s. It's a story of family relationships. It's the story of poverty. It's set in Brooklyn, obviously. It's the story of determination and the will to try to change your financial status with hard work. It's all about hard work and determination. So it's a beautiful book. I loved this book so much. I don't want to give too many spoilers, and I'm not going to go into much depth of each book because this video will be an hour long. So I'm just going to really summarize it basically as best that I can, because a lot of these books I read months ago and my memory is not as good as it used to be. Okay, number 9, The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi. I'm sure you've seen this everywhere. It was an Oprah Book Club pick on her Apple Plus channel. Anyways, this is my first book by this author. I've never read anything by him before. I think he has written a lot of nonfiction. This is my first one. And it's about a boy named Hiram who is born into slavery, and he has a special gift of memory. And when his mother is sold, he has no recollection of her. He has no memory of her. And it's the story of him trying to remember his mother and also to escape slavery. It introduces the Underground Railroad and Harriet Tubman and the atrocities that took place during slavery, and it was so good. It was beautiful. I actually listened to this book while I was reading it, and the actor Joe Morton is narrating it on Audible, and I highly recommend that you do it that way because he acts it out a little bit, and the expression in his voice, and it was so good. It made the whole experience of this book so good. It enhanced it enormously. I don't think I would have gotten as much out of it, to be honest with you, because it's not an easy book. There's a little element of magical realism in it, and that's not my favorite. But listening to it with Joe Morton, is it Joe Morton? Yes, Joe Morton narrating it, and I was reading it at the same time, it really helped. So I think with more difficult books, I think that's a good way to comprehend it a little bit better. But that was number 9. Okay, number 8 is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This actually, I'm teaming up with her other book, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I also read this year. I loved them both equally. They were both 5-star books for me, but I don't have that book in my possession, and I'm kind of cheating and combining them as one because I'm trying to keep it down to 10 favorites. So this is another coming-of-age book of a girl, Daisy, who is an aspiring singer in the mid-1960s, set in LA, and her story, and then there's also a love story element in it with a band member. It's like an oral history of the book, kind of like an interview style format of the book, which was very interesting. I've never read anything like that before, and I really liked it. I mean, it was so quick. It was just a really quick read. I really liked it. Okay, moving along. Oh no, not yet. Not for that one yet. I have to do this one because I don't have this book in my possession because I borrowed it from the library, and it was called Clock Dance by Ann Tyler. It's about a woman in her mid-60s. Her name was Willa, and it's a very quiet story of a domestic novel about your choices in life and how your outcome is based on your choices. And for Willa, in her case, it talks about, I think it starts when maybe she was 11 years old, and then it like skips a couple of decades until another major part of her life happens, and it picks up from there. But it was so well done. Ann Tyler's one of my favorite authors. She just tells a great story of the human experience. I mean, they're everyday mundane things that we all take for granted. She writes a beautiful story about them, and I just love her writing. Now, if you are the type of person who needs a lot of action, or a lot happens, or then Ann Tyler might not be the author for you, because she's just a very quiet, brilliant, in my opinion, storyteller. But it's just like everyday life, domestic settings and things. I mean, I love her. I love her books. I've read a few of them, but Clock Dance was one of my favorites this year for sure. All right, and then number 6 is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. This was such a fun read. We read this for my book club 1 month this past year. I don't remember which month it was, but this was so fun. It's about a girl who is kicked out of college, Vassar College, in the 1940s, and she's sent to live with her aunt. Oh, I can't think of the aunt's name. Aunt Peg, maybe? I think it's Aunt Peg, who is a lesbian in New York City in the 1940s, and she owns a failing theater, I like to say theater, in the 40s. And so she's introduced, she kind of comes from like a stuffy family. I shouldn't say stuffy, they're well off and they're very proper. So she's, well, maybe the word is more sheltered. She comes from more of a sheltered background. So when she's introduced to this new lifestyle of her aunt down in the 1940s, of these like flamboyant showgirls and actors and these really, larger than life type people, more extroverted, it's like a wake up call for her. So she's introduced to some pretty interesting people. But then there's a little turn, there's a little twist, and a scandal that happens, and then she has to pay for it the rest of her life. And it's about her healing of that and her coming to terms and forgiving herself. It was so fun. But there's like an element of feminism in here too that I just absolutely loved. I just love Elizabeth Gilbert. I'll read anything she puts out. But we all, I think all of us in book club love this book. So this was number 6 for me. And then number 5 is The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I'm sure you all, unless you live under a rock, I don't want to insult anybody, but I'm sure you all have heard about this book. It's the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale of Gilead and all the handmaids. I actually, in all honesty, I liked this one better than The Handmaid's Tale because it wasn't as creepy. I'm not a big fan of sci-fi, fantasy, magical realism, dystopian type books, but I loved The Handmaid's Tale, but it was a little bit creepy for me. And this one, in my opinion, was more storytelling. Margaret Atwood, I think, is a master writer, so I don't really have to say much about this, but I must say, I think it takes place 15 years after The Handmaid's Tale ended. So that's where it picks up, and it's narrated by 3 different female characters in Gilead. Well, one is not in Gilead, but one's, okay, I don't want to give out too much. It's so hard to do these videos, you guys, because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. So it's hard for me to not tell too much, but tell enough where you want to read it. So, anyways, I actually like this one better than the first one. I thought it was fantastic. Okay, then we have, oh, no, not yet. I have Cilka's Journey by Heather Morris. I don't have that book with me either because I borrowed it from the library, but it was so good. If you read The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris, this is the number 2 book. I don't know if it's really a sequel because it doesn't really have, well, Cilka is a character from The Tattooist in Auschwitz, but it was a very small character in the first book, but this is her story. I don't know. I would still read The Tattooist of Auschwitz first before you read Cilka's Journey, but it's a story of Cilka, who is a historical fiction novel, and she is set to Auschwitz when at the age of 16, and then the war ends and the camps are liberated. However, she is charged with a crime of, I don't remember, she's charged with some stupid, I don't remember, I'm sorry, I don't remember what it was, but she's sent to Siberia to a prison camp for her breaking these, oh my god, I can't remember what it is, what she did. She does something with the enemy, I can't remember. Anyways, she's sent to Siberia. This book is so good, and I'm sorry, I'm screwing this up, but it really is a beautiful book. She's sent to this prison camp where the conditions are just as bad, if not worse, than Auschwitz. However, she befriends this female doctor, and the female doctor kind of takes her under her wings, and if that can help you maybe, figure some of this out without me giving out too much. It's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And it gives you a sense of the resilience of the human, your will to live. It was so good. It was so good. Oh my god. I could tell you so much, but I don't want to ruin it. Okay. So that was number 4. And then number 3 is The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. Like Ann Tyler, Ann Patchett's one of my favorites. I love these authors that just write about simple life story. They're just awesome storytellers. The characters are developed in a way where you feel like you know them. You feel like you could have a cup of tea with them and you're having a conversation at the kitchen table. Well, the Dutch House did that for me. It's a sibling. It's a book about siblings. It's narrated by the boy Danny, and his older sister's name is Maeve. I believe she's around 7 years older than Danny is, and their mother left them when Danny was very little. I don't even remember if he remembers her at all, but Maeve does remember her slightly. So Maeve kind of raises him in a way because the father's very distant, and he brings in a new wife. And the Dutch House is this architectural marvel in Philadelphia. And that's all I want to tell you because there's lots of twists, and it's beautifully, beautifully written. I keep saying that, I know, because all these books, in my opinion, are beautifully written. That's why they're 5-star ratings from me, and they're my favorites of the year. But this was, I love Ann Patchett, just like I like Ann Tyler, just like I like Frederick Bachman, just like I like many more authors. But yeah, pick this one up. It's really, really good. And then my number 2 book is The Ladder in the Sky by John Boyne. John Boyne is one of my favorite authors, big time. I love The Heart's Invisible Furies. Last year, I never did a favorites video last year, and I'm kicking myself for not doing it because that was one of my top 5. I think it was my number 2 last year. But this one, I have never, in my entire life of reading, I have never loved to hate a character as much as I hated, what was his first name? Maurice Swift. This is an aspiring writer who is, let me, how do I put this? He will do anything to get published and to be a successful writer. And when I say anything, I seriously mean he will do anything to be a successful writer. What do you think? Anyways, oh, I remember, look at it's tabbed so much. I have all these tabs. I use these those plastic little page flag things. And I remember I had so many because I get so infuriated with him, and he was such a jerk. But yet I could not put this book down. I could not wait to see if karma prevailed, or if he has to pay his dues sometime. And I can't ruin it for you, but I loved him. I thought it was really good. Okay, and I'm gushing, I know. Okay, and then my number one choice for the year is The Nickel Boys by Colson, Whitehead. This is the author. I think he won the Pulitzer Prize for the Underground Railroad. And in my opinion, I liked this book a lot more than I liked the Underground Railroad. It's set in this boys' reform school in Florida, which is a real place that kids went to for over 100 years to be so-called reformed, when really it was a slave camp is what it was. But what was the boy's name in here? Elwood. Elwood Curtis is the boy, and oh my gosh, he's a smart boy. He's a huge fan of Dr. Martin Luther King, and he quotes him, and he just believes in what he preaches, and he's on his way to college, and he is at the wrong place at the wrong time, and he's accused of something that he didn't do, and he's sent to this reform school, and boy, does his life take a turn. I mean, he has such a promising future, and yet that one incident changes the whole course of his life, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. But this was a very important book. I think everybody should read this book. I think this book should be required reading in high schools for kids everywhere. I think it's a really, really important book, and actually, I loved this book. The characters were so much more developed for me than they were in the Underground Railroad. So if you liked the Underground Railroad, I think you will really like this one, because I like this one even more. But I have a friend of mine who, before he buys or he purchases a book, or even reads a book, he reads the first sentence and the last sentence of every book. And I don't read the last sentence because I feel like it's a spoiler. What's the point? Why bother? So I have started reading the first sentence in each book before I really decide to buy it. And this one is perfection, in my opinion. The first, let me get past the prologue here. Oh, for God's sake. Where is it? Of course, okay, the prologue, excuse me. It says, even in death, the boys were trouble. So that's 7 words that are so intriguing. I've never really had a book that was that intriguing before. Even in death, the boys were trouble. How could you not want to know what happens? Anyways, I thought this was brilliant. Okay, now I have 3 nonfiction books, and I don't know, I think I've mentioned this in previous videos. I like to listen to nonfiction more than I like to read the physical book. I don't know why, I just comprehend them better. But the one that I do have in my possession is The Choice, Embrace the Possible by Dr. Edith Eva Eger. And this is her memoir of the Holocaust. But more importantly, I don't want to say it like that. I shouldn't say it like that. But what I liked about this book, more than what I've read other memoirs of Holocaust survivors, is it focuses a lot after the war's over and after she's liberated, the camps are liberated. It focuses on her healing and how she heals herself by helping others. It was very, very well done, and I just fell in love with her. I want to be her friend. I think she's still a doctor. Yeah, she goes to military. What am I trying to say here? I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. People who have been deployed, the military, when they come back, she helps them with their PTSD and their healing of what they've seen when they're deployed. So, oh my goodness, my timer just went off. That's 20 minutes I've been talking. So I better hurry up because I don't want your eyes to glaze over, which they probably already are. Okay, so then I have two more. Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Oh my goodness, that was one of my favorites. Okay, be quiet. I'm done. Stop. My timer's telling me to shut up. Know My Name by Chanel Miller, who was the girl who was sexually assaulted by a boy at a college party. And it's her healing and her telling her side of the story, and then the ridiculous sentence that the boy had to serve for his crime was just ludicrous. I could go on to that for another hour, but we'll just keep it at that. And then my third favorite nonfiction book of the year was How to Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones. This is a boy, a young black gay man in the I think Texas, right? I think he's from Texas, and he's coming to terms with his sexuality and his place in the world. It was so well done. It was very raw, very honest. I think I actually cried a couple times.